today we're just going to walk through sort of building a little bit more confidence around system selection. And to do that, one of the things we're going to do is just walk through a process that we've used a lot of the time with businesses when they're working through this process of, hi Susan, great to see you, thanks for joining. So I guess the curiosity here, and I have this wish too. I also wish that there were things that I could change about systems that I would like to be able to change. So keen to hear from you if you have something that you are prepared to share in that vein. I want to make this useful for you, so please, if you have any questions that you want to add to the chat along the way, I would really, appreciate that interaction. I'm going to walk through this process of building sort of confidence inside your own business as you head towards selecting your next session, your next system. So before we do that though, one of the things that I wanted to address was what it is that motivates us to make these kinds of changes in business. Like why do people decide I need a new, a better, a whatever type of system? So one of the things that we see, pardon me, sorry.
So as you say, I think Paul's in the waiting room.
Okay, sure. Samantha, I might just ask if Samantha will jump in and have a look at that. So one of the things, this is some research done by others, but some of the things that motivate businesses to upgrade or change systems are noted here. So 36% of businesses looking to improve their productivity. Maybe they've lost touch with how long it's taking people to do manual jobs that shouldn't really be done that way, or maybe they're looking to improve their existing technology stack. So 31% say they've outgrown their stack. We've seen a huge surge in generative AI in the last 12 months in use in business. I was at a South by Southwest session yesterday on sensitive AI and leadership in business, and the guy actually said, the presenter actually asked the room, hands up who has not had a play with AI, and no one put their hand up. So just about everyone has had a crack at that. So technology is, and the pace at which we're interacting with some of those technologies really, heating up too. And so, the other piece here is that 27% was saying that they're expanding a product offering. So a lot of the things that we've seen in the last sort of probably 12 months or maybe 2 years around product offerings, particularly in retail, has been around types of payments. So payments has had a massive growth in the last sort of few years, and slowly, there were the leaders who were offering all sorts of different payment types. And then the other thing is delivery types. So we've seen a lot of delivery type, shifts in deliveries, particularly since the pandemic. Lots more delivery options have become the norm for retail businesses. So I think of these reasons as being kind of like growth reasons, but then there are other reasons, of course. We've also seen firsthand sometimes where a relationship breaks down between a vendor and a client, or changes in leadership or ownership contribute to sort of the relationship breakdown. We've also seen, I think, in the broader landscape, like massive data breaches, very highly publicized data breaches. And when I see things like highly publicized data breaches, it always makes me wonder, what are the less publicized ones that aren't coming to our attention in quite the same way? And then we have this sort of what I call the grudge implementation, which is where you get a vendor who sort of unexpectedly says, oh, we're no longer going to support this software, or we're not doing this anymore, and you've got 12 months to get off it. And often for a client, that is a really painful kind of implementation, because they've usually already got plans for the next 12 months or what. So no matter what reason or what it is that's motivating you, making the right choice really does take some effort. You're not imagining it. It is actually quite tricky. And to demonstrate that, I really wanted to share, I wanted to share with you one of the experiences or harder experiences that I've had in my time of working with people and systems. We worked with a very fast growing business that was bursting at the seams. They'd outgrown what they could do with spreadsheets, and it was time for them to implement an ERP system. And the operations lead was given this mandate to get an ERP happening. They were on board. They seemed super ready to get things moving, but the business owner sort of was very much in the background. They'd taken this sort of step back and they were not involved, and they were kind of expecting this system to miraculously appear without them engaging. And in a surprise to very few, that did not go well. We spent close to a year, I would say, working with this particular client on configuration and testing, and they actually shelved the project before going live. It was a really devastating experience for us, but it was also something from which we learned a heap. I'm kind of curious, has anyone else ever had this experience? Samantha, I know you have. Yes. Yeah, so it can really be quite demoralizing. But once you have this experience of coming to a place of understanding that you need a new system, it's really tempting to sort of jump right in and get started. It's a little bit like when I go grocery shopping without a list and I'm hungry, it typically results in some very poor food choices. It's sort of similar when you go shopping for software. If you don't have a structured approach, it can result in some less than ideal outcomes. So one of the tricky parts about making decisions for systems is that they're group decisions. And when we're, sort of choosing a new system for a business, we need to ensure that it works for lots of different types of people or for lots of different people across the business. And getting to consensus in groups can really take some wrangling and listening and working on different ideas. And when I think about all of the different kinds of stakeholders that we often have in the work that we do with clients, it's like, you start with end users, but then there's also someone who's paying for it. There's usually IT, operations has a view, finance, then legal, potentially there's procurement people involved. So like there's lots of different people that need to get something out of this decision. And often, or we have seen, not often, but it does happen that these decisions take a really long time just because of the sheer number of people that are involved in getting to an answer. Sometimes you get one person who just decides and that's it, and we just move on with it, but it's not always the case. Our client from the story really wanted to just sort of outsource this problem to somebody else, and it is really tempting to outsource this process. It's completely understandable, especially when you don't feel like you're the expert. However, my caution here is that if you completely disengage, you get the kind of results that you're not really wanting. The vendor that we were working with was in a different time zone. That meant, lots of tricky things around times of day, working times of day, which was difficult to manage. And building trust through those sort of outsourced relationships can sometimes be difficult, especially, we've all developed better skills, I think, at building trust online, but especially through, online experiences, even like this one, are much more, normal now than perhaps 5 years ago. But it really does take time to sort of build trust across businesses. And then I think the other sort of piece here is that really outsourcing relationships can sometimes actually lead to more complexity in terms of the number of people involved. And so if you've already got internal complexity around lots of different working relationships, adding more doesn't always make it simpler and easier. So my view here is, of course, that it's better to build confidence inside your business with someone who can help you answer the questions that you're not sure about yet. My feeling is that too much choice, or the choices, can be mesmerizing and often lead to overwhelm. So what you're trying to do is, of all the possible systems, And I think about this as a little bit like dating, although my experience at dating is a very long time ago, and so, you know, possibly completely outdated. Of all the possible systems, you need to find the one that can do what you need or close enough, and one that you can afford and that doesn't, you know, really sort of stretch you too much financially. And then on top of that, you need to add the layer of people who you think that you can work with for the next 10 years or so. Because big systems usually are in your business for a really long time. So the question then is, what's right for you? So how do you find the one that suits you? Well, one of the things we don't do is assume that what works for others will necessarily work for you. And when I think about this, I think of it a little bit like being an outfit on somebody else. You see an outfit on somebody else, assume it will look the same on you. This is not true. Just like body types, businesses are unique, and you need to choose systems that will best suit you. So how do we do that? We start with looking inside first. So it's my personal belief that whether it comes to systems or self-improvement, knowing yourself is actually critical to having others be able to help you better. And so there are two key activities that we work on here when we're looking inside. And actually post this webinar, you'll get the templates for doing these key activities or sort of examples so that you can work through the process yourself if you want to. So typically what we do is we map out all the systems that are existing. So what do you already have? What information is in them? What's shared across them? How well does this work for you? So these are sort of the big picture questions around, you know, how does information pass between different systems in your business? And then alongside that, what we do is we map the processes. So as much as most business leaders think they know what's going on in their business, it's often, or it's not uncommon, let us say, to have people share that they've learned a lot about their own business through the process of mapping processes, even though that sounds a bit circular. So people tend to learn a little bit about other teams in their business, and that brings the team together a little. So the other piece that we look to complete here is really around alignment of your team. So who'll be on your team for a project? Yes, of course, you'll have a vendor. Yes, they bring lots of experience, but then what are you meeting that experience with? And you need the most experienced, knowledgeable people in your business who know your product and customer really intimately. But then countering that, balancing that with those people who are not so wedded to the existing process that they can't entertain the idea of doing something differently, or that they're not stuck in the, oh, we did that once 20 years ago and it didn't work kind of mindset. So they're the pieces that we work on around alignment. And then sort of the next piece is building what I call a POA, or a plan of action. And the plan of action usually includes something around what success looks like, how we'll measure that success. And, you know, success can be different for different businesses, just a little bit like systems can. We've had business teams articulate success in lots of different ways. So one team said that for them, success would be having less than 10 shared Google Sheets. For another group of people, success was, you know, and this was a while back, so success was getting their conversion rate to over 1%. So it depends on your team, where you're at, and what you need to be able to do to, you know, like, what does success actually, tangible success, look like for you? So the other things that we work on in the plan, apart from, you know, who's going to do the work, is, you know, a little bit about pre-preparation. So what are the risks? What are the non-negotiables? And then what can we actually get ahead of and prepare? And often this is a little around data and cleaning data. So, you know, what can we do there to make sure that we've got the best possible data to take to our new system? We also do stuff like, you know, when people got leave planned, what other things are going on in the business, those types of things. So they're the kinds of things that you can sort of look ahead to do in just even in a very broad kind of way. I actually have a year on a page thing that I send to lots of people who are planning to do this kind of work. Say, okay, we'll just map out, broadly speaking, what's happening next year, and that's a good exercise. It helps people figure out what they're doing next. I just wanted to give you some examples of what those things actually look like. So this is an overview diagram. And even a small business, like I was saying before, even a small business like mine has multiple systems. And what we find when we do this kind of work with people is that typically they experience some kind of perhaps insight or surprise at either how many systems they actually have. So sometimes people are not aware that there are additional plugins or integrations. They've sort of grown over a period of time and, wasn't necessarily widely consulted about. Sometimes people express surprise at which ones do and don't easily talk to one another. And sometimes there's sort of a little bit of a surprise about what's automated and what's not. So this diagram ends up looking different for each business that we work with, but it's a place that you can look at all the systems that you're working with and really get to grips with which ones actually function well for us and which ones don't. So typically we will color code this diagram as well so that we can help people understand where are the bottlenecks and pain points for their teams. So that's just an example. There'll be one of those in the email that we send out afterwards. This is an example of a process map. So this is a very high level process map. And every business is different, but just as a guide, it's just to give you a bit of a guide. Typically, what it helps us to do is to see the detail of where people are getting stuck or where people are unclear about a process. So if people explain a process to you, and my typical response is that I'll get to a point where there'll be question mark, what the hell happens here? And so part of this is just clarifying and getting greater detail around how does this whole thing flow together? And what if it doesn't move from here to here? Is there another branch or is there another decision point where you're actually going in another direction? So it really helps us to get into the bottlenecks and the double handling and the detail of what's going on and highlight where you might want to improve those processes with a new system. So it's just an example. And then we also do workshops. So like there's part of this process is bringing a team together to work on what their roles will be in the project and what that success criteria looks like. Ideally, we like to do these in one room with all the people in the team. That's not always possible, but it is quite a good way to bring people together and to have them spend some time together before they head into the work of a project. So this is sort of a little bit about what we do in this process. So, I mean, this is how we support people doing this, but basically what it's doing is it's building confidence inside a business in terms of how they're able to make the decision for themselves. So rather than outsourcing the decision-making process, what we're looking to do is try and build confidence around what it is that we're able to make decisions inside the business ourselves. So I hope that's helped shed some light on the importance of, making these decisions for yourself and how to build some confidence around this decision-making process. The hard part is often like, where do we start? And so these sort of touch points or these documents are a really good place to start. So I guess this is an example of a situation where we actually conducted one of these audits. We had a retailer who had got sort of very far down the path of starting to implement a new system, and they realised that they really had skipped a couple of pieces, that a couple of departments had been missed. So going back and completing all of those processes, reviewing the overview diagram, and ensuring that the whole team was sort of on board and clear about what their success factors would be, was a really good starting ground for them to then set themselves up for the next project. Oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a question here. I was just going to type it in, but I might as well say it. So we're at the point where we're selecting a new system, and we've got the choice of going with the, I suppose, the one that everybody is fast adopting, and they're already established and have been in the market a while, versus a brand new software where we would be the first customer, even though the creators have been using it in their own business for some time. And so can you sort of give us some high-level thoughts on what the risks are of going with the new the new one that seems more attractive? Because for us it looks like we would get more of a look into getting things done for us rather than just being one of many customers.
Yeah, and look, this is actually one of the pieces that we do in this work, is that we help frame up some of these questions with people, and probably don't have time to do a really good pros and cons list for you in this exact moment, but some things to think about. Like, so as you rightly pointed out, you would probably get a better deal, and as a first customer of a new piece of software, you're in a really great position to negotiate a good deal, and B, the people that you're working with want a reference. So they want you to be happy with what you get. So typically, and I've worked on a couple of these where it's a brand new piece of technology, it's a brand new implementation, it was the first time in Australia. Gosh, I've done that many of the first time in Australia, it's not funny. The pressure on the vendor is for them to ensure that you perceive that you are successful. And so they will work perhaps a little harder and perhaps, go a little further for you as a first customer. I guess the flip side of that is that, being with the tried and trusted means that there are plenty of other people who are using this system or using this set of processes or what have you, and you're going to be able to perhaps float on the coattails a little bit of others. So I mean, that's one of the benefits of having the big industry accepted system in your business, is that what other people have already potentially paid for and learnt on and what have you, you're not doing the learning and the developing and the, so there's pros and cons to both. It's really about whether or not you've got the capacity to put the energy into being that first customer. I work with plenty of clients who say, we don't want to be first. Everyone wants to be the second person off the rank. They want to still be in the leading group, but they don't want to be the first.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. The other thing is that we have lots of old and probably dirty data in our existing system. And so we're kind of leaning towards not importing any of that at all and just starting fresh. The vendors are, wanting to charge us for a basically a migration and configuration and, setup and all that kind of stuff. How do we get them to split out the fees for migration so that we don't pay for that as part of a job kind of lot for what they're trying to do for us? I mean, we can ask them to do that, obviously, but I mean, typically, what as a percentage of implementing a new system, how much is migration?
Typically, data migration, the vendor will supply you with either templates or a series of steps and say to you, this is how we're going to do this and this is what it looks like, right? So the onus is nearly always on you as the client to ensure that your data is clean and correct. And that's sort of part of that whole partnership piece, making sure that you've got people who are the right level of detail focus to ensure that you put the data in correctly. I think the other thing is, if you're saying that you would like to not do the data migration, that you would like to leave your things behind, a couple of things to just think about there. How are you going to access that previous information?
Yeah.
So that's one thing to think about. And then the other thing to consider is what rules or guidelines are you going to create for your new system? So things as boring as, how many digits does a phone number have?
Mhm.
Does it have a plus in front of the, do you add phone numbers into your system with pluses in front of them? Those kinds of conventions around how you import your data and how they sometimes call it a mask, like what format does the data exist in? Making some decisions about how you're going to do that, or constructing some rules for yourselves, thinking through what does that look like for us in our new system. That's a really good exercise. And actually, that's one of the things that we sometimes do in these workshops is sometimes we'll actually take, for example, product data and work through the process of what are all the rules around product data. So, how will we create colors, or how will we decide when a product is a new product versus a reordered product, or those kinds of rules that you need to, they're business rules that you need to decide on.
Okay.
Yeah. I appreciate the questions. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay. Suppliers are too slow. That's interesting.
Well, that's because our current system has some things locked down which we can't change ourselves. And that's kind of frustrating when we need to make changes, and then it takes them weeks to even acknowledge our ticket. And I mean, your question was, what was the thing we would change about the current system? That's one of them. But we got to the point where what we're going to change about the current system is the current system and choose a new one. So,
Good punchline.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, we're going to probably have to keep one license of the old system just to access that stuff, because we have to keep that data. But the idea is to take the lilies off the old pond and put them in a new pond and leave all the pond scum in the old pond, basically.
I like this. This is a very nice way of describing it. I often call it like moving house, but the old pond, new pond is quite lovely.